Barber is a best-selling author and founder of Lighthouse Catholic Media. Jesse Romero is a retired law enforcement officer, a former kickboxing champion with a master's degree in theology. And together, they share a passion for evangelization and PhDs in common sense. You're listening to The Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. To join the show, call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
Terry's not here today. This is Jesse. Pull up a chair, pour yourself something to drink. Let's have a conversation. Let's engage. I want you to help me engage the culture of death with prayer, fasting, and full contact Catholicism. Have you had your breakfast this morning? You probably have. It's 11 o'clock. You're probably ready to have lunch or probably having brunch. Well, I'll tell you what. The best breakfast you could have, better than oatmeal, better than Wheaties, better than menudo. Yep. You want some breakfast with the champions? Soul food, the daily gospel reading. What does Jesus have to say today to us? Luke chapter 10, verses 13 to 16. The Holy Gospel says, Jesus said to them, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida." Now, you're probably saying, okay, what the heck is that? Bethsaida and Chorazin, these were two towns in Galilee that refused the message of Jesus Christ. They rejected what Jesus had to say, and they were in Galilee, which is in northern Israel. So Jesus says in today's gospel, "For if the mighty deeds done in your midst had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have long ago repented, sitting in sackcloth and ashes." Well, these are two Old Testament cities that never heard the message of Christ. They were two Gentile towns that were north of Palestine on the Mediterranean Sea on the coast. And unlike the people in Jesus' day in Galilee, these cities had no direct opportunity to hear or believe the message of Jesus Christ. And so Jesus is saying, you know what? They don't have as much guilt as you do, Tyre and Sidon, Chorazin and Bethsaida, because you've heard me and you reject me. Then Jesus says, "Will you be exalted to heaven? You will go down to the netherworld." Now Jesus is saying this to these two cities that are rejecting his message, but this is also what happened to Satan. Satan was exalted once upon a time, but he's been cast down to the netherworld. And Jesus also mentions, he says, "And as for you, Capernaum," so what's Capernaum? Capernaum is where Jesus lived. That was Jesus' Galilean residence. He lived with Peter there. And the townspeople in Capernaum, they also rejected Jesus' message. They had ample opportunities. They saw his work, they heard his message, and they didn't respond to his preaching. So Jesus indicts Bethsaida, Chorazin, and Capernaum. Three towns that were in Galilee that knew about Jesus, heard his message, and outright rejected him. Then Jesus Christ ends, he says, "Whoever listens to you listens to me." Who's he talking to? The 12 apostles. And Jesus says, "Whoever rejects you rejects me, and whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me." Jesus is talking in context here to the 12 apostles who are now the new Israel of God. They've now they've usurped the authority of the 12 Jews that comprised Old Testament Israel. And so Jesus Christ, he's telling his apostles that he's giving them his authority wherever they go. And he's saying that if they reject you, 12 apostles, they reject both the Father and myself. Jesus says that in John chapter 12, verse 48 and 49. And Jesus, at the Ascension Thursday on Matthew 28:19, he repeats these words again. In Matthew 28:19, he gives the 12 apostles an even greater share of his royal, priestly, and prophetic authority upon the apostles there at the day of ascension. So that's the soul food for today. I don't know about you, but it's important that every one of us start off our day with some real soul food, which is the Word of God. Every day I post a daily reflection with Archbishop Sheen. Every single day. I blog it. It's on my website. And here's a challenge today. This is very powerful. Archbishop Venerable Sheen says today, how we will be real Christians. How we will be real Christians. Venerable Sheen says, when we stay close to the good Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, we will see the flesh of all the poor people that we meet as an extension of the body of Christ. That outlook will come through to them, then we will be Christians. Then we will not be in the mountain in ecstasy, nor in the valley impotent and ineffective. But we will be the kind of Christians the world is looking for. Check this story out that Venerable Sheen shares. He says, a group of Russian soldiers broke into a barn not very long ago in Russia and found hundreds of people in prayer. The Russian soldiers said to them, you are violating the Soviet law. Prayer is forbidden. We give you 5 minutes to leave. All who remain will be shot dead. Guess what? 2 of them left. The Russian soldiers threw down their weapons and their guns and said, we want to be Christians too. We only wanted to be sure that you were real Christians. Think about that. What would you do? Let's just say you're in your Catholic parish. And let's just say some anarchist group, and there's anarchist groups in this country, as you well know, on both the right and the left. Imagine an anarchist group going to your parish and saying, oh, you're praying? I'll tell you what, you better stop praying in 5 minutes or I'm going to shoot you in the head with this rifle. What would you do? Would you say, bring it on? I'm in a state of grace. I'm ready to go. Or would you run out of the church and say, don't shoot me, I want to live? That's a pretty powerful challenge to you, isn't it? It really, there's a gut check. And it reminds me of a story that goes like this. If it became against the law in the United States tomorrow to be a follower of Jesus Christ, to be a Christian, would you be arrested? Would there be enough evidence to convict you of being a Christian, a follower of Christ, if tomorrow it became illegal in America to follow Jesus? I'm just posing that question. Chew on it as you're eating your breakfast or your brunch. Here's a great email question somebody sent me. Jesse, and by the way, I blog the questions, the best questions. I put them on my blog every day as well on my website. And the question goes like this. Jesse, Saint Catherine of Siena, back in the 13th century, admonished the Pope and encouraged him to return the papacy to Rome from Avignon, France, where the popes had lived since 1309. The popes had lived in France for 67 years, all of St. Catherine of Siena's life, and then some. When she decided to visit Pope Gregory XI in the summer of 1376, St. Catherine spent 3 months in Avignon, France, tirelessly working to realize her dream of the Pope's returning to Rome. Pope Gregory resisted St. Catherine's firm, humble persistence, but eventually she won him over, and he returned the papal residence to Rome. So the question is, Jesse, can you point to a passage in Scripture or a doctor or a father of the church that justifies St. Catherine of Siena's actions where the lesser, a layperson, criticizes the superior, a pope, in this case, Pope Gregory XI? That's a great question. Now, both testaments of Scripture are full of examples of subordinates criticizing superiors in public. The criticism of the leaders of Israel by the prophets and priests, we see that in the Old Testament. Also, the public humiliation of King Saul by Samuel the prophet. Also, the denunciation of King Ahab by Elijah. We also see the attack on Herod the Tetrarch by St. John the Baptist. These are, in general, criticisms of officials. And usually they're divinely sanctioned by God. The persons may have even been inspired by God to do this, even though they lack institutional standing. This pattern is taken to its logical extreme by the condemnation of the elders by the prophets Daniel when he was only a child, in Daniel chapter 13, verse 45. And our dear Lord made the situation clear while eviscerating the chief priests, the scribes, and the Pharisees in Matthew 23, verse 2. Jesus acknowledged that they held the seat of Moses. That's a position which meant that the people should listen to them as speaking with authority. But Jesus Christ, he called them hypocrites. He says, but don't do what they do. So private remonstrations, they also take place in the Bible. A notable example is the prophet Nathan criticized King David, but even this was not intended as a way to hush things up. And Nathan speaks of God's coming punishment of David in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 12. And in other cases, it's fair to assume that the prophets realized that the time for private discussion had passed, as we see in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 17, where Jesus says, you can confront your brother and confront him. If he doesn't listen, take 2 or 3 witnesses. If he doesn't listen, take the church, or take him to the church. And we can even take this. There's also a famous confrontation of a lesser rebuking a greater. Paul rebuked Peter in Galatians chapter 2, verse 11, because of Peter's hypocrisy. So, that's the answer to that question. You're listening to the Terry and Jesse Show. You don't want to miss the next segment. We're going to be talking about the Steelers and an Army veteran who defied the coach. You agree with him? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Back to the Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. Want to join the conversation? Call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
Life is short, death is for sure, sin is the problem, Jesus is the cure. So, what does St. Thomas Aquinas say about St. Paul rebuking Peter in Galatians chapter 2, verse 11? St. Paul rebuked St. Peter for his hypocrisy, for his actions not being consistent with his doctrine. St. Thomas Aquinas said this, quote, where there is a proximate danger to the faith, prelates must be rebuked, even publicly, by subjects. Thus St. Paul, who was subject to St. Peter, rebuked him publicly. Close quote. That's St. Thomas' commentary on the Epistle to the Galatians. So the question was, again, can an inferior ever point out errors to a superior? And the email question was St. Catherine's actions against the Pope Gregory back in the 14th century. Well, did you hear about what happened to this incredibly decorated Army veteran? The Steelers coach was annoyed that a decorated Army veteran left his team in the locker room and he went to go stand by himself for the national anthem. Yep. A few days ago, offensive lineman Alejandro Villanueva, he decided to leave the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room in Chicago in order to stand, hand on his heart, for the national anthem as the rest of the team stood in the locker room. Do you have a problem with that? Well, his coach sure did. Alejandro Villanueva is a decorated ex-Army Ranger who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, earning a Bronze Star for his valorous service valor, or his valorous service, maybe I could say that. But, you know, I get it. There seems to be this emotional national debate swirling around the country, and his team, the Steelers, had collectively decided not to go to the field of play until after the national anthem was over, and this was a move that the head coach, Mike Tomlin, he's the one that orchestrated this. He framed this as an effort to sidestep the politically fraught controversy between the NFL and President Trump. But you know what? Alejandro Villanueva, he would have none of this political correctness. He elected not to go along with the plan of his coach, and he stood on his own convictions. He walked down the tunnel by himself and paid homage to the flag of the United States of America and the national anthem all by himself. And in a post-game conference after the Steelers lost to the Bears, Coach Tomlin he was pretty unhappy with his offensive linemen. The Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin, he said last Sunday that he didn't want offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva to stand for the national anthem. Coach Tomlin, he said he wanted Villanueva instead to sit it out with the rest of his teammates in the locker room. And Coach Tomlin said in a post-game press conference that he wanted 100% participation from his team in whatever course of action the team took during the national anthem. And when reporters asked the football player Alejandro Villanueva about his coming out for the national anthem, Coach Tomlin said, quote, "Like I said, I was looking for 100% participation. We were going to be respectful of our football team," close quote. Okay, I get it. Let me see if I got this straight, okay? Coach Tomlin, did you know? He's a Clinton donor and fundraiser. Did you know that? Okay, I get it. He's upset that Villanueva was not respectful of the football team because the football team decided to stay in the locker room, and he decided to honor the country, which he fought for, by going down the tunnel and standing up courageously by himself and really risking his career because he didn't want to snub the national anthem because he served this country. And I asked myself, what was Coach Tomlin thinking, buying into all this political correctness? Coach Tomlin thinks that, if we all stay in the locker room, we all just sit it out, this is going to be a display of unity. And Coach Tomlin was upset because he said what Villanueva did was a display of disunity. That seemed to bother Coach Tomlin. But, I say to myself, give me a break. If anyone on that roster has the right to do what he did, it's Alejandro Villanueva. Do you have a problem with what he did? Are you starting to see red like I am? When kneeling for the national anthem is being celebrated as brave heroism. I'm scratching my head. I'm saying, what? Is this microphone on? I mean, give me a break. A genuine American hero, Alejandro Villanueva, he's isolated by his team, and he's roundly criticized by his coach for standing up for saluting the nation and the flag that he volunteered to serve in the U.S. Army. I don't know about you, but are you infuriated? I'll ask you. Some people inside the NFL bubble, they seem to think that they've won this battle because they're doubling down on their position not to honor the national anthem. But the real division seems to be between the league and the sports media on one hand and the sports fans who finance the entire industry on the other. Because the vast majority of you, I'm sure, the vast majority of you are on the side with Villanueva over the national anthem sitters and kneelers whom they booed across the country over the weekend. And I scratch my head here, but the disconnect between the politically correct position that the NFL coaches are taking, the disconnect between them and the average American is striking and enormous. Incidentally, in case you didn't know, sales of the Army Veterans NFL jersey have reportedly skyrocketed since this one man, Alejandro Villanueva, he stood up. And as I saw over the weekend, when you set aside the protesting players, to me, I don't know, there is no country where you can make the amount of money by throwing a piece of pigskin 100 yards and putting on football pads like the United States of America. This is the greatest country in the world. And all those athletes are great athletes. That's why people watch them. But you know something? Not a chance they'd be paid nearly as much money as they're being paid here in the United States of America. So setting aside the protesting players' disrespect and self-righteousness, as well as the president's sometimes bombastic language, The exhausting and relentless politicizing of our culture is becoming intensely aggravating to you, I'm sure, the typical American sports fan. So who is Alejandro Villanueva? The guy's 6'9", 330 pounds, offensive lineman, tight end, who's part of the Pittsburgh Steelers 53-man roster. And Villanueva, his father, was a Spanish naval officer who worked for NATO, and he spent most of his childhood in Spain. Villanueva returned with his parents and siblings back to the United States in 2001. Villanueva graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 2010, which was followed by 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan. This guy truly is. This guy truly is an American hero. Villanueva, during his first tour, Villanueva aided wounded soldiers amid enemy fire, which is a heroic deed that was later recognized by his being awarded a Bronze Star for his valor. He's also a practicing Catholic, which I like more than anything else. But he was asked, did you learn anything in the Army that you use in football? He says, the number one thing I learned from the Army was how to deal with different people, how to read their emotions and understand where they're coming from, and how to work together with them, how to lead them in important undertakings, and how to forgive. The Army provided me with a very diverse set of experiences that challenged me and helped me to grow as a man and a citizen of this country. These things can be used in football and in other areas of life. He was asked by Trent Beatty, who is a reporter. He was asked, how has Catholicism helped you, Alejandro Villanueva, overcome the horrors of war? He says, even though I was born in Mississippi, I spent most of my childhood in Spain, mostly a Catholic country, where the religious beliefs permeate the culture in many ways, even to the point that you don't really appreciate them, you take them for granted. That's what I did as a child. And that mindset continued when my family came back to the U.S. in 2001. He says, however, when you're shipped off to war, you have to find a way to deal with inevitable fear that comes into your heart. There are so many uncertainties about what lies ahead that you have to get support from somewhere. And the best place to find that support when you go to war is in the Catholic Church. Good answer, my friend, good answer. He also says, religion is a deeply personal relationship with God. So that's what I find the most comfort in. Despite all the other things that may be going on inside of you, what goes to the very core of your being is what you do in terms of religion. If you're right with God, this 6'9", 330-pound lineman says, if you're right with God, everything else is fine. If you're not right with God, everything else is out of place. Being connected with God is the most important thing there is. He says, I believe the Mass is the most important thing in my life. Way to go, Alejandro Villanueva. Hey, we're going to move on to one of the great contributions given to us by St. John Paul II. What's that? He gave us Catholic media. Did you know that? Yup. Stick around. Don't turn that dial. You don't want to miss how St. John Paul II turned the culture.
You're listening to The Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. To join the show, call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
Blue Collar Catholic Radio. By the way, this Saturday, October 7th, I'm going to be at Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Palm Desert. Men of the Desert for Christ Conference from 7 to 12 noon. I'll be speaking in English to the men. From 1 to 4 p.m., I'll be giving the same talks in Spanish this Saturday, October 7th, Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Palm Desert, California. Hope to see you there. You know, you have two types of news out there. You've got fake news and you got Catholic news. Well, you know what? Jack Nicholson has something to say about Catholic news. Can you play the clip?
You can't handle the truth.
Yep. I think a lot of people can't handle the truth. And I'll tell you, one of the great contributions given to us by, and notice I'm going to preface this, St. John Paul II. Okay? St. John Paul II, he realized the times that we live in right now, secular humanism, moral relativism, liberalism, modernism, people's personal pet ideologies, putting politics over their faith. St. John Paul II knew that. And that's one of the reasons that 5 days after he was elected Pope, St. John Paul II, he met with journalists around the world, and the Pope, who was a scholar, a man of letters, an actor, and also a holy man, he understood the power of words and images as an actor, and he also understood the power of media. That's why, I'm not sure if you know this, in his own country of Poland, John Paul II, he saw what state-run communist fake media, what they did. He lived in a country where there was fake news, communist-run media. And he knew that fake news obscures the truth to create confusion and cement power. That's what's happening in this country. Most of the stuff we get, see, the mainstream media is pretty smart. What they do is they give you truth mixed with a little error. Truth mixed with a little error. That way, it's like giving you a cold glass of water with a drop of cyanide. You can't detect the cyanide very well because the water looks like crystal clear water. Looks good to drink. That's what the media does very well here. And Pope John Paul II, he also saw that in Poland, he also saw the underground media that was starting to emerge. There was a resistance. They were willing to risk their lives and freedoms to tell the truth. We've got an underground media here too as well. And it's growing. And that's a good thing. Thanks to the internet. And St. John Paul II, he knew that words and images could be used very powerfully by Satan. They could sow the lies of Satan. Or words and images could bring the freedom that comes from living in the truth. That's why Pope John Paul II, 5 days after he was elected Pope, he told the press, he told journalists that they should use the freedom of the press to grasp the truth. The Pope told reporters to try and grasp the authentic, deep, and spiritual motivations of the church's thoughts and actions. The Pope told the reporters 5 days after he was elected, he said, the press is called to elevate the spirit and heart of men of goodwill and at the same time, the faith of Christians. And so because of St. John Paul II and Vatican II, really, the church has moved into the media market, which is a good thing. This is a very good thing. The mission of Catholic media is to seek the truth and to share it, especially in light of the gospel of the eternal and enduring truths of Jesus Christ. Now, it doesn't mean we're always going to get it perfect, but I can tell you, no Catholic wants to put out fake news. Because Catholics are bound by a higher moral compass. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ and our baptismal vows. And so, one of the things that has emerged that's been very helpful since Vatican II, very powerful in the new evangelization, is a news agency called CNA, Catholic News Agency. That's an apostolate that's dedicated to discovering the truth and giving us the truth and reporting the truth. And the writers and the producers and editors, they're solid Catholics that are committed to using their talents for the sake of the gospel and to reveal the truth and to help Catholics understand the events of the world through the lens of faith, guided by the truths of the gospel. That's what we seek to do here, by the way, in Immaculate Heart Radio /Relevant Radio. We try to look at the issues of the day and give you a perspective from a Catholic Christian point of view. We try to give you a biblical worldview versus a secular worldview, which is what the media gives you. Because let's be honest, the public square in the United States, it's become pretty chaotic. And our political culture it's often vindictive and small-minded, and our political culture often prefers, power politics instead of truth. And many times the mainstream media incites conflict. they rather than report facts, their discourse becomes a shouting match. So it's difficult to know what's true. That's why Catholic media is so important. And that's why Pope John Paul II, he told the lay people to launch into Catholic media. Because our mission is to point to the truth. We want to inform you. We want to educate you. We want to inspire you. I aspire to inspire until I expire. And while doing so, I may even perspire. Okay? The point is, we want to point out what's evil so that Catholics can respond prayerfully and also with actions. And we also want to point to the church's work in the world, as we're going to do the next segment. We're going to profile this incredible corporal work of mercy in the next segment by a Jesuit priest. But also in Catholic media, we want to explain the factors that influence the church's life and ministry, and we want to point to the ways that God is moving powerfully in this world. We want to help Catholics know the truth, believe it, and practice it. And so, in our age of media and news reporting, I thank God that we have Catholic News Agency that's trying to report real news in ways that reach Catholics wherever they're at. And I also thank the Lord for the National Catholic Register. No, I didn't say the National Catholic Reporter. No. I thank the Lord for the National Catholic Register and EWTN News Nightly, these sister organizations to CNA. These media apostolates are a blessing to the new evangelization, because our mission is most of all to tell the truth, but to do it with charity. And we do our work because we love Jesus and because we love you, and we want to give you, our listeners, information, perspectives, and the context that's going to help you live as Catholics in our times. And I don't know about anybody else, but I hope to continue this work. And I plan to be united with you every day in search for the truth which is found through the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Going back to the email question, somebody asked me about St. Catherine of Siena, who basically remonstrated Pope Gregory XI. St. Thomas Aquinas says, quote, "Where there is a proximate danger to the faith, prelates must be rebuked even publicly by subjects. Thus St. Paul, who was subject to St. Peter, rebuked him publicly in Galatians chapter 2, verse 14. So that's from the angelic doctor, St. Thomas Aquinas. And also, going back to the NFL kneel, don't kneel issue. You know, somebody just sent me a link on Facebook. It says, it got two football players, Glenn Coffey, a black football player who played in the NFL, and Colin Kaepernick, another black football player born in the NFL. Here's what it says. Glenn Coffey, born in 1987. Colin Kaepernick, born in 1987. Glenn Coffey, played for the San Francisco 49ers. Colin Kaepernick, played for the San Francisco 49ers. Glenn Coffey, drafted in the third round of the NFL draft. Colin Kaepernick, drafted in the third round of the NFL draft. Glenn Coffey, gave up millions of dollars and an NFL career to serve his country. Colin Kaepernick refuses to stand for the national anthem because the American flag oppresses black people, and he makes $19 million a year. Just think about that for a second. Yeah, just think about that. I'm scratching my head as I just shared this with you, because I'm saying to myself, is this microphone on? One of the things as a Catholic that the church has always taught me is to be grateful. That's what the New Testament teaches us, to thank God for what we have. I thank God that I was born in the greatest country in the world. I thank God that I was born in the United States of America. And my mom and dad, you can't believe, when they came over here 50 years ago from Mexico, my mom and dad said, we just about kissed the ground that we stepped on when we got here. My mom and dad, who have both passed away, they've gone to their eternal reward. Both of them were proud to be part of this great nation. Hey, did you know that the month of October is the month of the Holy Rosary? And by the way, you definitely want to stay tuned, because we've got a great interview on the next segment. But the month of October, in case you didn't know, is the month of the Holy Rosary. Yep. The Catholic Church celebrates the Feast of the Holy Rosary on this month to highlight this beautiful form of prayer, which goes back to the Blessed Mother's appearance to St. Dominic in 1214 A.D. So traditionally, Catholics have honored Mary by observing the Fatima devotion, attending Mass, going to confession, meditating for 15 minutes on one of the mysteries, and the recitation of the Rosary on the first Saturday of 5 consecutive months. So, reacquaint yourself with this beautiful devotion called the Holy Rosary. Hey, we got an incredible priest on the next segment and the incredible things that the Jesuits are doing over in Africa. Don't change that dial. Stick around. You don't want to miss what's up next.
Views expressed on the Terry and Jesse Show are for educational purposes only. Now here's Terry and Jesse.
Is prayer your steering wheel or your spare tire? I hope it's your steering wheel. I want to tell you right now, hang on to that steering wheel. Keep your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, as the Bible says. By the way, this weekend I'll be doing a bilingual conference. Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Palm Desert, California. Saturday, October 7th, I'll be doing a men's conference in English from 7 a.m. to 12 noon. Then I'm going to do the same talks in Spanish for the men from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. in Spanish. Same talks. We're going to talk about the power of prayer, and we're going to talk about spiritual warfare, Catholic style, in English, 7 a.m. to 12 noon Spanish, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Palm Desert. Be there. I'll see you this weekend. You know, the Catholic Church, when it comes to the spiritual works of mercy and the corporal works of mercy, most especially, the Catholic Church is second to none when it comes to being the hands and feet of Christ on planet Earth. We've got a special priest. We'd like to welcome him to the radio program today, Father Peter Henry of the Loyola Jesuit Secondary School. Father Peter, welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show.
And thank you so very much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
By the way, Father, you guys have my favorite name of all the priestly orders all out there. I've always loved the Society of Jesus. I've always said, if I were to become a Catholic priest, I could see my name with SJ, Society of Jesus. But Father, having said that, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing, the Jesuits, over in Kasungu, Malawi. Tell us a little bit about the background of the school that you founded, and tell us a little bit about the progress that's taken place.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity, Terry. Basically, you know, the Jesuits we were founded back in the 16th century and work all over the world and work in Africa. And about 28 years ago, I went to be part of the Zambia-Malawi province of the Jesuits. It's now probably about 100 Jesuits there. About 80 are Zambian and Malawian. So, you know, it's really a local group. They're Zambia and Malawi, which is South Central Africa. Very poor countries, but peaceful countries, democratic countries, and that makes a big difference. But countries that don't have good education. And that's why, about 6 or 7 years ago, we Jesuits said, look, in Malawi particularly, they need better education opportunities for the young people, and so we're going to set up a school there. And people said, you know, you Jesuits, you have great schools. It'll probably be a private boys' school in the capital. We said, no, it's going to be in a poor rural area where most of the kids, 30%, get a chance to go to school. The rest of the kids don't get that chance. It's going to be coeducational from the start. We've got to train the girls, too. It's going to be all boarders so that there's a complete learning environment, and it's not private. We cooperate with the government of Malawi. The government of Malawi knows the value of good education, especially good Catholic education, and they pay the teachers. Now, that's a big thing because that's the biggest amount of money in any school. That means the fees are about $500 a year rather than $5,000 a year or something. So it's really an option for the poor. So Terry, that's what we were able to get underway with a lot of help from Jesuits, from bishops' conferences, from foundations, and individual donors. Said, look, this is an important thing. That country's never going to develop unless you educate its youth. We can't educate them all, but at least we're going to try and educate about 600, and we're underway. We
Father
began
Peter,
about 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Please.
So you're the director of development there. So you're right there, boots on the ground, hands-on, correct?
Well, right now I'm in Tacoma, Washington, which is my hometown, up on the West Coast.
Got it.
But I've been there, right there, with boots on the ground. But basically my task is raising funds, raising funds. And that's what has, made me very, very appreciative how God works through so many different people, making small donations, large donations, foundations, bishops' conferences, Jesuits. That's my task, to raise those funds. So I continue to do that right now while I'm here in Tacoma, because a lot of people say, yeah, they can appreciate Africa has a tremendous future. The fastest growing Catholic church in the whole world is in Africa, and that's a vitality. We're a Jesuit school, a Catholic school. Not all the students are Catholics, but they know they're going to a school with a good religious value framework, and that's very, very important.
Father, so what's the breakdown in Malawi where the school's at? About how many Christians are the population? Is it 50%? 20? I mean, what's the Christian population? And is the rest of the population, are they secular? Are they Muslim? And is there obviously people seem to get along there because they don't seem to be making the nightly news. Is that correct?
Well, that's at least not the nightly news here. As we say, usually the news from Africa, unfortunately, is only if there's a problem. There's problems in Africa, but there's also tremendous potential, tremendous beauty, tremendous people, and I've experienced that, and that's why I'm so committed to see this school getting underway. Basically, the Christian population in Malawi is probably about 80%. Wow. Now, some continue to stay with a lot of their own traditional religious values or so, but they belong to the Christian churches. Of those churches, say the Anglicans are very strong, the Episcopalian, because it was a British colony, Presbyterians, because that's where David Copperfield and some of the early people came. But basically what you've got is probably about 50% Catholic, and they're very strong. I had to learn one of the local languages to be able to celebrate Mass in the villages and in the local areas, and I kid, the Masses are about 2.5 hours long. There's lots of singing and dancing and praying, and so when I came back to the United States, I had to tone down my the time of my liturgies a little bit or so. But there's a real vitality, and the school is a good Jesuit school. The curriculum is strong. The students realize that they are privileged because most of the youngsters don't get a chance to go to school. The less than 30% of those who finish grade 8 actually have a chance to get into grade 9 or so. And so we're educating a small group, but they know they're getting a good education, and they're so appreciative of people, who give contributions. Terry, can I tell people how they could
Absolutely.
contact us?
That was my next question. Father,
Very good.
How can our listeners support this great work over in Africa?
Well, basically, we have a web page, and if you do any internet work, you go very simply www. and then Loyola, Loyola -Malawi, MALAWI.org. And that brings you immediately to a page which you can make a credit card donation. You can see the addresses if you write a check. Everything is, 501c3, the Jesuit Missions Office. They'll let you know so you get a tax exemption. Basically, let me repeat that again. It's www.loyola, -Malawi, MALAWI.org. That'll bring up pictures, that'll bring up stories, and you sort of see the excitement. Also, you can call me. Call me at my home phone right here in the Jesuit residence that I'm staying here in Tacoma. That's 253-761-3535. 253-761-3535. And you can leave a message. If you don't get me right away, I can get back to you. And really encourage you, prayers, we need that. But in addition to prayers, we also need some donations, for books to provide the young people, for scholarships for those families that can't even make it. And we're still, putting in more space for the children. We got good gender balance, about 50% girls, 50% boys. But, we need mattresses, we need mosquito nets, we need food, we need the basic sorts of things that go on in a boarding school. And also, we're building a beautiful chapel. We need, benches and for the chapel there. There's a lot of practical
give us the website one more time, because we got 1 minute. The website one more time, please.
Loyola-Malawi, MALAWI.org. And that'll get you, or my phone number, 253-761-3535.
Father, thank you very much. We'll keep that information for anybody who's interested, and we'll post it on our page on ImmaculateHeartRadio.com. Thank you, Father. Keep up the good work. God bless you. Hope to talk to you again.
It's for you. Blessings for you. God bless now. Bye.
Thank you, Father. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Hey, you know what? We're all called to be soldiers of God. I'm a soldier of God. How about you? I'm a warrior and a member of Team Jesus. I serve the people of God, and I live the Christian virtues and values. I shall always place the mission first. I shall never quit. Surrender is not an option. I shall never leave a fallen Catholic comrade. I am disciplined, physically, morally, mentally, and spiritually tough as nails. I'm trained and proficient in my spiritual warrior tasks and skills. I always maintain my spiritual weapons, my equipment, and my faith. I'm an expert and a professional in the sure knowledge and practice of my Catholic faith. I stand ready to deploy, engage the enemies of God and save souls in close and immortal combat. I'm part of Team Jesus. I'm a soldier of God. How about you? Hey, we'll see you next week. Been listening to the Terry and Jesse Show. Two Catholics with a PhD in common sense. See you next week. Same Christ time, same Christ channel. God love you.